The cosmos is vast, not merely in the cold, indifferent measure of light-years, but in its profound, echoing silence. For eons, the great empires of the galaxy, the crystalline architects of the Lumina Concord, the hive-mind swarms of the mycelium collective, the ancient slow-burning intellects of the gravic hegemony, had charted the spiral arms, catalogued the wonders, and waged their intricate, often brutal wars. They spoke in frequencies of graviton pulses, pheromone symphonies, and quantum entanglement whispers. They understood power, they understood order, they understood the delicate, often fragile balance of a million civilizations, but they did not understand Earth. Not truly. Not until the silence broke. It began, as all great reckonings often do, not with a bang but with a whisper carried on the solar wind. A whisper emanating from a single, insignificant blue-green marble orbiting an unremarkable yellow dwarf star in the Orion Arm's forgotten backwater. A whisper that, to the sophisticated sensors of the galactic powers, registered as noise, chaotic, dissonant, alive noise. The Lumina Concord dismissed it as stellar interference. The mycelium collective noted it as an anomalous biosignature, perhaps a nascent hive but too primitive to warrant attention. The gravic hegemony, ancient and weary, barely registered the blip before filing it under local phenomena, low priority. They were wrong, profoundly, catastrophically wrong. For on Earth, the whisper was the sound of 8 billion souls breathing, 8 billion hearts beating, 8 billion minds churning with dreams, fears, loves, and a terrifying, unyielding will to survive. Humanity wasn't just another species climbing the evolutionary ladder. They were a deathworlder species, forged in fire, ice, flood, famine, and their own relentless, self-destructive ingenuity. Their history wasn't written in serene philosophical treatises, but in blood, sweat, and the desperate, brilliant sparks of innovation born from the edge of extinction. They knew loss, they knew despair, and they knew, with a bone-deep certainty that defied logic, how to claw their way back from the abyss. Now that abyss had a name, the Cathar Ascendancy. The Cathar were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were curators, ancient biomechanical entities whose civilization spanned millennia. Their society built upon the meticulous collection and preservation of unique biological and cultural specimens. They saw the galaxy not as a resource to be plundered, but as a grand museum, and they were its self-appointed, utterly ruthless curators. Their vessels, sleek obsidian shards, humming with contained stellar energy, moved with silent, predatory grace. Their warriors, clad in adaptive carapace armor that shifted color and texture like living stone, moved with chilling efficiency. They didn't seek slaves. They sought exhibits, and Earth, with its teeming, chaotic, violently diverse biosphere and its species capable of both profound art and unimaginable cruelty, was the ultimate prize. The first contact wasn't a meeting. It was an acquisition. Off the coast of what was once called Japan, the K'ator vessel, Silent Collector, descended. Not with blaring horns or demands, but with the quiet finality of a scalpel. Its energy nets, woven from focused chronotan fields, swept down, not to destroy but to contain. Entire coastal cities, Tokyo, Shanghai, Sydney, simply vanished. Not vaporized, not crushed, contained. Lifted whole, buildings, people, pets, parks and all, into shimmering stasis fields within the K'ator hold, preserved like insects in amber. Millions blinked out of existence in the space of a heartbeat, leaving behind only empty streets, abandoned cars, and a silence so profound it screamed. Panic, raw and primal, erupted across the fractured remnants of Earth. The old nations, the old rivalries, the old hatreds, they didn't vanish overnight, but faced with an enemy that didn't negotiate, didn't communicate, didn't even seem to see them as sentient beings worthy of dialogue, only as specimens. Something primal stirred, a memory buried deep in the human genome, older than language, older than fire, the memory of the tribe facing the saber tooth, the flood, the endless winter. We stand together, or we die alone. In the fortified command bunker deep beneath the ruins of Geneva, the last vestige of a United Earth government, now rechristened the Terran Defense Command, TDC, General Eris Thorne watched the holographic feeds. His face, etched with the lines of a man who'd seen too many wars fought for too little reason, was grim. But his eyes held a fire that hadn't burned in decades. Not the fire of ambition, but the cold, hard ember of survival. Status on the Pacific Rim? His voice was gravel, worn smooth by command and loss. On the main holotank, a young analyst, Kaylin, flinched slightly. Her fingers flew over the console, pulling up fragmented data streams. Minimal resistance. General. The Cathar bypassed military installations entirely, focused on population centers. Density. Biodiversity hotspots. They're collecting ecosystems. Her voice cracked on the last word. Thorne slammed a fist on the console, the sound echoing in the tense silence. Collecting? They're erasing us, piece by piece. He paced, the worn soles of his boots scuffing the polished floor. We have kinetic rods, railguns, fusion warheads. We have nothing that even scratches their hulls. Their energy nets. They phase through our shields like they're mist. Despair threatened to choke him, the familiar specter of human futility. He'd seen it before. The wars over oil, over ideology, over scraps of land, always ending in ash. Was this just a bigger ash heap? Then a new feed flickered to life on a secondary screen. Not military. Civilian. A shaky, handheld camera feed from a rooftop in Mumbai, miraculously still transmitting. Below, chaos reigned. People ran, screamed, clutched children. But amidst the panic, something else was happening. Strangers were helping strangers. A man in a business suit carried an elderly woman on his back. A group of teenagers formed a human chain to pull people from a collapsed building. And then, a voice, amplified by a jury-rigged speaker system, cut through the din. Not a leader, not a politician, just a woman. Her voice raw with tears but steady with resolve. They took my city, she cried, her words echoing across the feed. But they will not take my spirit. They think we are just things to be put in a box. Look at us. Look at us. We are human. We build. We love. We fight. And we will not be collected. Her words, simple, desperate, yet defiant, resonated. Across the fractured networks, other voices joined. Not coordinated, not planned, just human. A fisherman in Chile singing an old folk song into his radio. A group of monks in Tibet chanting prayers for the lost. A child in Nairobi drawing pictures of the vanished cities and holding them up to the sky. 1 million, then 10 million, then 1 billion individual acts of defiance, grief, and connection, bleeding into the global data streams. It wasn't a unified message, it was a cacophony of humanity itself. Thorne watched, transfixed. The despair in his gut didn't vanish, but it was joined by something else. And a dawning, terrifying realization. This was their weapon. Not the railguns. Not the nukes. This. Meanwhile, aboard the silent collector, High Curator Zorvax observed the data stream from the primitive world. His multifaceted eyes, set deep within his chitinous face, processed the chaotic signals with detached curiosity. The emotional outbursts, the irrational displays of altruism, the sheer noise of it all. It was fascinating. Utterly inefficient. Of course, a waste of metabolic energy, but biologically unique. The neural patterns associated with this defiance showed remarkable synaptic plasticity under extreme duress. Valuable data. He noted it for deeper study once the primary specimens were secured. The specimen designated Homo sapiens exhibited unexpected resilience, a worthy addition to the Grand Archive. He signaled the fleet. Proceed to Phase 2, Continental Harvest. Back on Earth, the news came like a physical blow. The Cathar weren't done. They were moving inland, targeting the Amazon basin, the Congo rainforest, the Siberian tundra, the very lungs and heart of the planet. Thorne knew conventional defense was suicide, but the cacophony, the raw, unfiltered voice of humanity, it was growing louder, more complex. Scientists, linguists, network engineers, people who'd spent their lives arguing over protocols and patents, were now working together in underground labs, fueled by coffee and desperation, trying to find a way to amplify it, to turn the whisper into a shout the Cathar couldn't ignore. Dr. Ilara Vance, a neurolinguist whose career had been derailed by her controversial theories on collective consciousness, stood before Thorne in the Geneva bunker. Her eyes, usually sharp with academic intensity, were wide with a mix of terror and exhilaration. "General, it's not just sound or data," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "It's resonance, emotional resonance, biological resonance. Our collective fear, our hope, our will, it generates a unique bioelectromagnetic field. Weak, normally, but if we could synchronize it, focus it, channel it through every transmitter, every power grid, every neural implant we have left." Thorne stared at her. "You're talking about turning the entire planet into a speaker." "A resonator, General," Ilara corrected. A spark of her old fire returning. A single voice. Not 8 billion separate cries, but one unified frequency of humanity. It might disrupt their systems, their perception, their very understanding of what we are. It was madness. Utter, beautiful, desperate madness. The Thorne looked at the holographic map of Earth, dotted with the spreading blight of Cathar containment fields. He thought of the woman in Mumbai, the fisherman, the child with the drawings. He thought of everything humanity had ever been, and everything it could still be. He made his decision. "Do it," he rasped. "Mobilize every resource, every mind, every heart. Tell them to speak. Tell them to be human. All of them. Together." The order went out, not as a military directive, but as a plea, a call to the soul of the species. Across the ravaged continents, in bunkers, in ruins, in hidden valleys, humanity prepared to do the impossible, to find a single voice in their beautiful, chaotic diversity. High above the Cathar fleet, a constellation of obsidian shards against the starfield, began its final descent towards the Amazon. Servax monitored the primitive world's activity, increased energy signatures, unusual network traffic. He dismissed it as the final, futile thrashing of specimens before collection. Efficient. Predictable. He was wrong. As the lead Cathar vessel, the Grand Curator extended its primary containment field over the vast green expanse of the rainforest, something unprecedented happened. The chaotic bioelectromagnetic noise from Earth didn't just spike, it coalesced. It focused billions of minds, hearts, and souls driven by a shared terror and a shared desperate hope, reached for the same frequency. Not through technology alone, but through sheer, unadulterated will. A single, pure tone resonating with the sum total of human experience. Joy, sorrow, rage, love, creation, destruction, erupted from the planet. It wasn't sound, it was presence. It washed over the Cathar fleet like a physical wave. On the bridge of the Grand Curator, Zorvax staggered. His chitinous plates vibrated violently. His multifaceted eyes flickered erratically. Alarms he'd never heard before shrieked through the ship's bio-neural network. The containment field flickered and died. The ship's systems, designed to catalog and contain, recoiled from the sheer, overwhelming aliveness of the signal. It wasn't data, it was life itself screaming its existence into the void. Zorvax clutched his head, his ancient mind reeling. What is this? The signal wasn't hostile, in the way he understood hostility. It was assertive. It declared, "We are here, we are not specimens. We are human." For the first time in millennia, the Cathar ascendancy felt something alien. Not fear exactly, but awe, and a chilling, unfamiliar doubt. Below on the rainforest floor, the humans felt it too. A surge of power, of connection, unlike anything they'd ever known. They had spoken, and for a single breathless moment, the universe had listened. Then the Cathar recovered. The obsidian ships stabilized. The containment fields reignited, stronger, angrier. The Grand Curator's primary weapon, a focused singularity projector, began to glow with malevolent energy, aimed not at the forest, but at the heart of the human resonance. Geneva. Thorne saw the targeting lock on his console, saw the singularity core charging, saw the end. He looked at Alara, her face pale but resolute. He looked at the faces of his command staff, etched with the same desperate hope. He keyed the global calm, his voice rough but steady, carrying the weight of 8 billion souls. "Hold the line," he said. "Hold the voice." The singularity projector fired. The beam of compressed space-time, a needle of pure gravitation annihilation, lanced down from the heavens. It struck the Alps not with an explosion, but with a terrifying absence. A perfect sphere of reality simply ceased to exist. Geneva, the TDC bunker, the surrounding mountains, gone, erased from the map, from memory, from causality itself. A silent, spherical wound in the fabric of the world. Silence. Not the silence of awe, but the silence of utter devastation. The unified human resonance shattered like glass. The connection, the fragile thread of shared will, snapped under the weight of unimaginable loss. Grief, raw and overwhelming, flooded the global networks. Not defiance now, but despair. The Cathar hadn't just destroyed a city, they'd destroyed the heart of the resistance, the symbol of their fragile unity. Aboard the Grand Curator, High Curator Zorvax observed the results of the singularity strike with grim satisfaction. The chaotic resonance had been silenced. The primitive specimens had been taught a lesson: the futility of resistance against true order. The Grand Archive would proceed. He signaled the fleet to resume the continental harvest. Efficiency was paramount, but the lesson, it seemed, was not the one Zorvax intended. In the ruins of what was once New Delhi, now a sprawling refugee camp clinging to the banks of the Yamuna River, Kaelin huddled in a makeshift comms shack. Her console was dead, powered by scavenged batteries. Her eyes were red-rimmed, hollow. She'd lost her entire family in the Tokyo containment, then Geneva. Now what was left? She fumbled with a cracked datapad, trying to access any fragment of the old TDC network. Static. Only static. Then, a flicker. A weak encrypted burst. Not from Geneva. From somewhere else. She patched it through, her fingers trembling. A face appeared on the cracked screen. General Aris Thorne, bruised, bleeding from a gash on his temple. But alive. Behind him, chaos. The interior of a heavily damaged orbital command shuttle. The Odyssey tumbling in low Earth orbit. "Kaelin?" Thorne's voice was strained, laced with pain and urgency. "Can you hear me?" "General. You're alive." Relief warred with disbelief. "Barely. The bunker's gone." "Alara, she's gone." Thorne's voice broke for a fraction of a second, then hardened. "But the Odyssey, we got out." "Barely. Listen, Kaelin. The Cathar think they broke us. They think the voice is gone. They're wrong. It's just scattered. We need to rebuild it, not from the top down, from the ground up. Every survivor, every pocket of resistance. We need to find them, connect them, make them remember." "How?" Kaelin whispered, the enormity of the task crushing her. "The networks are down. The Cathar are everywhere. They're harvesting the Amazon right now. We use what we have," Thorne insisted, his eyes burning with that same fire Kaelin had seen in Geneva. Old radio bands, ham operators, carrier pigeons. "If we have to, find the pockets of humanity still fighting, still living. Tell them the story. Tell them about Geneva. Tell them about the voice. Make them understand our strength isn't in our weapons. It's in us, in our refusal to be silent." He transmitted coordinates, a fallback rendezvous point in the Andes, and a final desperate plea: "Be the voice, Kaelin, for all of us." The signal cut out. Kaelin sat in the dim light, the weight of the world on her shoulders. Despair threatened to swallow her whole. But then she remembered the woman in Mumbai, the fisherman, the child's drawing. She remembered the feeling of the unified resonance, the power, the connection, the sheer rightness of it. Thorne was right. The Cathar hadn't killed the voice. They just made it harder to hear. And harder to hear meant it had to be louder. She wiped her eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and began to type. Not on a military console, but on a scavenged civilian terminal. She broadcast on every open frequency she could find, Her message raw, personal, human. This is Kalen. General Thorne lives. The fight isn't over. Find your neighbors. Share your food. Tell your stories. Be human. They want us silent. We will roar. Her message, simple and heartfelt, began to spread, like a spark in dry tinder. Meanwhile, deep within the Cathar fleet, doubt festered. Zorvax reviewed the sensor logs from the Singularity strike. The resonance hadn't just vanished, it had fragmented. And the fragments, they were adapted. The biosignatures from the scattered human enclaves showed elevated stress markers. Yes, but also unprecedented levels of cooperative neural activity. They were communicating, organizing, in ways that defied Cathar predictive models. Their society, so chaotic and inefficient, seemed to possess a terrifying resilience, a capacity to rebuild connection from the ashes of destruction. Zorvax consulted the archive's oldest records, seeking precedent. He found none. No species had ever generated such a coherent, planet-wide bioresonant field. No species had ever recovered from a singularity strike with such fervor. He felt a disquiet, a tremor in his ancient certainty. Were they truly just specimens? Or was there something more? His unease was noted by his second-in-command, the younger, more aggressive curator Vix. The Vix saw only weakness in Zorvax's hesitation. The specimens grow bolder. High curator, the Vix hissed, his voice like grinding stone. Their fragmented signals are coordinating attacks on our harvesters in the Congo basin. They used primitive explosives, and themselves as shields for others. Illogical, wasteful, but effective. We must escalate. Purge the resistance nodes. Reduce them to manageable specimens before their noise becomes a threat to the archive itself. Zorvax considered. Purging went against the core tenet of curation, preservation. But Vrax's logic was sound. Uncontrolled variables were dangerous. Proceed with targeted sterilization, Zorvax ordered, his voice heavy with a reluctance he couldn't fully explain. But preserve genetic samples. The resilience trait is valuable. Vax's orders were brutal. Cathar hunter-killer drones, swift and silent as shadows, descended upon the refugee camps and resistance cells Kalen's broadcasts had inadvertently highlighted. They didn't contain. They erased entire communities, vanished in flashes of plasma fire. The message was clear. Silence or be silenced. The human resistance fractured further. Trust, so hard-won after Geneva, began to crumble. Was Kalen's broadcast a beacon of hope or a death sentence? Accusations flew. Old rivalries resurfaced. In the Andes rendezvous point, Thorne, recovering from his injuries aboard the crippled Odyssey, now hidden in a high-altitude cave system, watched the reports with growing dread. The Cathar were exploiting their greatest weakness, their disunity. "We're fighting ourselves as much as them," he muttered to his small, battered crew, engineers, pilots, soldiers, all that remained of the TDC elite. "They're turning our strength, our individuality, into a weapon against us." Dr. Alara Vance was gone. But her research wasn't. Hidden in the Odyssey's core memory was her final, incomplete work, the theoretical framework for the unified resonance field. Thorne knew they couldn't replicate Geneva. They needed something else. Something the Cathar couldn't predict. Something born not just of will but of sacrifice. He called Kalen via a secure, low-bandwidth laser link. Her face on the screen was gaunt, haunted, but her eyes held a fierce determination. "They're hunting us, General. Because of me." "No," Thorne said firmly. "Because of us, because we dared to hope. Listen, Kalen. Ilara's work, it wasn't just about amplifying sound, it was about intent. The resonance isn't just a frequency, it's a promise to protect, to endure, to be. The Cathar understand preservation as stasis. We understand it as life, constant, messy, fighting life." He outlined a desperate plan. Not to rebuild the global resonance immediately, but to create localized, hyper-focused bursts of it. Bursts powered not just by technology, but by acts of pure, selfless human courage. Acts the Cathar, with their cold logic of curation, could not comprehend. The Cathar see sacrifice as waste. Thorne said, his voice low and intense. We see it as the ultimate expression of value. We need heroes, Kalen, not soldiers. Heroes. People willing to stand in the light knowing it will burn them, so others can live. Their final act, their final intent, channeled through our tech, it might just punch through the Cathars' shields. Not to destroy, to communicate, to show them what they're missing. It was a terrible, beautiful idea, and it required volunteers who knew they would die. The first test came in the irradiated ruins of Chicago. A Cathar harvester was moving through the skeletal remains of the city, its containment field sweeping towards a hidden schoolhouse sheltering hundreds of children. Kalen, coordinating from New Delhi, identified the target. Thorne, from the Andes, activated the prototype resonance amplifier, a jury-rigged device cobbled from salvaged Cathar tech and human ingenuity, linked to the Odyssey's dying power core. A young medic named Jax, who'd spent weeks tending to the sick in the ruins, volunteered. He knew the harvester's patrol route. He knew the schoolhouse location. He also knew the amplifier needed a biosignature anchor, a living human mind focused solely on the intent to protect within the harvester's immediate vicinity to work. Jax didn't hesitate. He walked out of the ruins, into the open street, directly into the path of the advancing Cathar drone. He raised his hands, not in surrender but in a gesture of pure, defiant protection. His mind focused on the children behind him, on the promise of their future. He activated the small amplifier pack strapped to his chest. The Cathar drone paused, its sensors confused by the single intense biosignature radiating pure protective intent. Then Jax pushed. Not with his body but with his will, amplified by the divine focused pulse of human resonance. Love, fear for the children, unwavering resolve slammed into the drone. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. The drone didn't explode, it stuttered. Its containment field flickered wildly. Its smooth, predatory movements became jerky, confused. For 3 critical seconds it was blind, deaf, and disoriented, long enough for the children and their guardians to escape into the deeper ruins. Jax was vaporized by the drone's retaliatory plasma burst. But he'd bought them time, and he'd proven Thorne's theory. News of Jax's sacrifice spread like wildfire through the resistance networks, not as a tragedy, but as a beacon. Others stepped forward. In the frozen wastes of Siberia, an old hunter named Anya lured a Cathar patrol away from a hidden village by mimicking prey calls, her mind focused on the warmth of her grandchildren's faces, her resonance pulse freezing the patrol's targeting systems long enough for the village to vanish into the blizzard. In the deserts of Australia, a group of indigenous elders performed a centuries-old songline ceremony. Their collective intent focused on the land itself, creating a resonance field that caused Cathar harvesters to malfunction and crash into the dunes. Each act of sacrifice, each focused pulse of pure human intent, chipped away at the Cathar's certainty. Their predictive models failed. Their efficient curation became chaotic, messy. Losses mounted. Rich grew furious, demanding total annihilation. Zorvax grew contemplative. He studied the sensor logs of these resonance pulses. They weren't weapons. They were statements, declarations of value that defied his understanding of biology and society. Why would a specimen willingly cease its own existence to preserve others? It made no evolutionary sense, yet it was happening. Repeatedly, he began to question the very foundation of the Grand Archive. Was preservation in stasis truly the highest form of respect? Or was this chaotic, self-sacrificing, living existence something more? The turning point came during the Battle of the Mariana Trench. The Cathars, seeking the unique deep-sea ecosystems, deployed their largest harvester yet, the Leviathan's maw, to the ocean floor. Thorne and Kalen knew this was a critical target. Losing the deep biosphere would be an irreplaceable blow. But the Leviathan's maw was shielded, massive, and guarded by a swarm of hunter-killer drones. The plan was audacious. Use the Odyssey, its power core nearly depleted, to dive into the trench and deploy the main resonance amplifier directly onto the harvester's hull. It would require a pilot willing to fly the crippled shuttle on a one-way mission, manually attaching the device while under fire. Thuran knew he had to do it. He was the symbol, the last link to Geneva. He recorded a final message for Kalen and the Resistance. A simple, powerful statement: remember who we are. Remember why we fight. Speak with one voice. Always. As the Odyssey plunged into the crushing darkness of the trench, Kalen coordinated the surface resistance. Every surviving human settlement, every hidden cell, every individual with a working transmitter was instructed to focus, not on fear, but on hope, on the image of the deep ocean teeming with life, on Thorn's sacrifice, on the promise of a future. They began to generate the resonance field, weaker than Geneva, but purer, fueled by shared purpose and grief. Aboard the Leviathan's maw, Zorvax monitored the approaching shuttle and the rising chaotic resonance from the surface. He saw the pattern, he saw the intent, and for the first time he understood. This wasn't noise. This was a language of sacrifice, of connection, of a value placed on life that transcended mere biological existence. A language his species had forgotten millennia ago. He made a decision that would shatter the ascendancy. As the Odyssey, battered and sparking, neared the Harvester, Thorn prepared to eject the amplifier. Cathar drones swarmed, plasma bolts tearing into the shuttle's hull. It was over. Then the Leviathan's maw's shields dropped, not flickered, not failed, dropped, deliberately. The Cathar drones, confused by the sudden lack of their command ship's shielding protocol, hesitated for a critical microsecond. Thorn, seeing the opening, slammed the amplifier onto the Harvester's hull and triggered the final sequence. The resonance pulse, amplified by the device and fueled by the focused will of millions on the surface, erupted. It wasn't aimed at the drones. It washed over the Leviathan's maw itself. On the bridge, Zorvax felt it, not as an attack, but as understanding, a flood of human emotion, grief for Thorn, hope for the future, love for their world poured into his ancient mind. He saw Jax protecting the children. He saw Anya singing to the blizzard. He saw the woman in Mumbai holding up her spirit. He saw the value. He also saw Vax on the command deck of the Grand Curator, his face contorted with rage at Zorvax's betrayal. Treason, High Curator. Vax roared over the comm. You have compromised the archive. The specimens are contaminated. They must be purged. All of them. Zorvax looked at the sensor display showing the fragile blue planet, still radiating its defiant, beautiful resonance. He looked at the image of Thorn's shuttle, now a silent tomb on the ocean floor. He made his choice. The contamination, Zorvax transmitted, his voice calm, resonant with a newfound certainty, is on our side, Verax. We have been blind. The Grand Archive is wrong. He severed the Leviathan's maw's connection to the fleet command. Then, with deliberate final movements, he initiated the ship's self-destruct sequence, not to destroy the deep-sea life, but to destroy the Harvester itself and the Cathar drones swarming around it. A final act of curation, preserving the ocean by sacrificing the Curator. The explosion lit the abyssal plain like a dying star. On the surface, Kalen felt the resonance shift. The pulse from the trench wasn't just hope anymore, it was gratitude, and sorrow, and a terrible dawning realization. Thorn was gone. Zorvax was gone. But the Cathar fleet, it was fracturing. Blindrax, enraged and now in de facto command of the remaining ships, broadcast a galaxy-wide edict. The Terran specimens are an existential threat to cosmic order. They are to be extirpated. No preservation, no curation, total annihilation. Purge the death world. The devastating revelation struck Kalen like a physical blow. It wasn't just about Earth anymore. Rax in his fury was declaring humanity a galactic plague. He would bring the full, unrestrained might of the Cathar ascendancy and potentially rally other fearful empires to wipe humanity from existence. The fight for survival had just escalated from planetary defense to a war for the species' very right to be. And they were alone, truly alone. With no Thorn, no Zorvax, only the scattered, grieving but unbroken voice of humanity, and the terrifying knowledge that the universe now saw them not as specimens, but as monsters to be eradicated. The Cathar fleet, now under Rax's fanatical command, transformed. The sleek obsidian shards shed their curatorial elegance, revealing the brutal war machines beneath, weapon ports, previously hidden, glowed with malevolent energy. The fleet coalesced into a single terrifying armada, a dagger of pure annihilation aimed at the heart of the Deathworld. Vrax's broadcast echoed across the galactic comm channels, a chilling siren song of extermination. The Terran anomaly is a cancer. It must be cut out. For the stability of the cosmos, they must be silenced. Panic, colder and deeper than before, threatened to engulf the scattered remnants of humanity. Vrax wasn't just threatening Earth, he was painting a target on every human everywhere. The fragile hope kindled by Thorn's sacrifice and Zorvax's defiance flickered dangerously low. In the Andes, Kalen stood before the surviving leaders of the resistance, hardened fighters, weary scientists, community elders, their faces etched with the weight of extinction. "They see us as a disease," Kalen said, her voice raw but steady, echoing Thorn's final words. "So let's show them what a disease does. We don't just survive, we adapt, we spread. We endure." She activated a holographic star map. Vrax thinks he's coming to sterilize a planet. He doesn't know we're already out there. She revealed the truth Thorn and Alara had discovered in the Odyssey's final days, Project Diaspora. Before Geneva fell, they'd launched dozens of stealth arcs, not grand colony ships but small, rugged vessels packed with genetic archives, cultural databases, and cryopods containing volunteers. They'd scattered them on trajectories towards distant, uncharted star systems, hidden in the Oort cloud, riding solar winds into the void. Humanity wasn't just on Earth. Seeds of humanity were already drifting among the stars. "The Kekthar can erase Earth," Kalen declared, her eyes blazing with a fire that mirrored Thorn's. "But they cannot erase us, not while a single human heart beats anywhere in this galaxy. Our voice, it's not tied to one world. It's in the blood, in the spirit, in the will to survive." Her words ignited the resistance. Despair hardened into grim resolve. If Earth was to be their tomb, let it be a tomb that echoed with their final defiant song. They wouldn't just hide, they would fight, not with the hope of winning a conventional war, that was impossible, but with the hope of buying time. Time for the diaspora arcs to reach safety, time for the human story to continue. The final battle wasn't fought on a single front. It was a symphony of sacrifice played out across the dying world. In the irradiated ruins of Moscow, engineers jury-rigged fusion reactors to overload, creating EMP bursts that blinded Cathar sensors long enough for refugee convoys to escape into the Ural Mountains. In the flooded streets of Venice, divers sabotaged Cathar underwater harvesters with shaped charges, their final breaths bubbling to the surface as acts of defiance. In the deserts of the American Southwest, nomadic tribes used ancient knowledge of the land to lure Cathar patrols into natural traps, sinkholes, flash floods, geothermal vents, turning the Deathworld's own lethality against its would-be exterminators. And through it all, the resonance grew. Not the unified field of Geneva, but 1,000, 10,000, a million focused pulses of human intent. Each act of resistance, each moment of courage, each whispered prayer for the diaspora arcs, fed the growing wave. It wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was a testament, a declaration written in blood, fire, and unwavering spirit. We were here. We mattered. We loved. We fought. Vrax watched the chaos from the bridge of the Grand Curator, now his flagship of annihilation. The human resistance was infuriatingly resilient. Their tactics were illogical, wasteful, yet devastatingly effective. Their resonance pulses were becoming stronger, more coherent, even as their numbers dwindled. It wasn't just noise, it was a narrative. A story of a species that valued life so fiercely it would die to protect its future. A story that, despite his fury, began to gnaw at the edges of his certainty. Was this truly a cancer? Or was it something else? Something the sterile perfection of the ascendancy had lost. He pushed the doubt aside. Sentiment was weakness. Order demanded purity. Focus fire on the primary population centers, he bellowed. Scorch the biosphere. Leave nothing but sterile rock. The Kekthar Armada unleashed its full fury. Orbital kinetic strikes turned continents into glass, Atmospheric incinerators boiled oceans. The very air grew thick with ash and the screams of the dying Earth. The cradle of humanity was being unmade. In the final hours, Kalen stood on a wind-swept plateau in the Andes. The last functional resonance amplifier, a device built from the wreckage of the Odyssey and Thorn's legacy, humming at her feet. Below, the valley was filled with the last refugees. The old, the young, the wounded. They weren't hiding. They were gathered. To witness. Kalen knew the amplifier needed a final anchor. A mind focused not on survival but on the essence of humanity. On its beauty, its flaws, its indomitable spirit. She looked at the faces below. The grandmother clutching her grandchild. The young couple holding hands. The old man playing a battered flute. A melody of home. She thought of Jax, Anya, Thorn, Zorvax. She thought of the diaspora arcs. Silent specks of hope hurtling into the unknown. She made her choice. She climbed onto the amplifier platform. She didn't activate a weapon. She closed her eyes. She opened her mind. She didn't think of fear or anger or even hope. She thought of everything. The taste of rain. The smell of bread baking. The sound of laughter. The pain of loss. The joy of creation. The quiet courage of everyday life. The vast, messy, beautiful tapestry of what it meant to be human. She poured it all into the amplifier, not as a shout but as a song, a final perfect resonance of pure, unfiltered humanity. The amplifier flared, not with destructive energy but with light, a soft, golden light that spread outwards, not as a wave but as a presence. It washed over the Cathar fleet in orbit. It washed over the dying Earth. It washed over the hidden diaspora arcs, light years away. On the bridge of the Grand Curator, Vax felt it. Not as an attack, but as revelation. The chaotic noise resolved into clarity. He didn't just hear the human story, he felt it. The love, the grief, the desperate, beautiful struggle to find meaning in a vast, uncaring universe. He saw the value Zorvax had glimpsed. He saw the life that his sterile curation sought to extinguish. And in that moment, the fanatical certainty that had driven him shattered. He saw not a cancer but a miracle, a species that against all cosmic odds had forged meaning, connection, and beauty from the raw chaos of existence. He looked at his clawed hand poised over the final annihilation command. He looked at the golden light bathing his ship, carrying the silent song of a dying world. He saw the faces of his own long-dead offspring, preserved in stasis in the archive, their lives reduced to static data points. He saw the emptiness of his own existence, dedicated to preserving life without understanding its fire. With a sound like a mountain breaking, Vervax lowered his hand. He didn't issue the final command. Instead, he transmitted a single galaxy-wide pulse on all frequencies. A pulse carrying the full, unfiltered resonance Callan had sent, amplified by the Grand Curator's own systems. A pulse that wasn't a declaration of war, but a witness, a testament to what humanity had. Then he did the unthinkable. He ordered the cannon fleet to stand down. Cease fire. His voice, stripped of its fury, resonated with a profound, weary sorrow. The curation is complete. The archive is closed. The Cathar ships, their weapons falling silent, hung in the ashen sky like obsidian tombstones. The bombardment stopped. The only sound was the wind howling over the ruined earth, and the fading echo of Kalen's song. Below on the plateau, Kalen opened her eyes. She saw the Cathar ships go dark. She saw the refugees below, tears streaming down their faces, not just of grief, but of awe. She had done it. She had made them see. Then the light from the amplifier faded. Kalen slumped, her life force spent, her mind emptied of everything but peace. She smiled faintly as the wind carried the last notes of humanity's song into the silent stars. The aftermath was not victory, but a strange, haunting peace. The Cathar fleet, under Vax's somber command, did not leave immediately. They deployed shuttles, not to collect, but to aid. They used their advanced technology to stabilize the atmosphere, to cleanse the radiation, to preserve what little biosphere remained. They treated the survivors not as specimens, but as witnesses, as the last bearers of a story too profound to be lost. Vivax himself walked among the ruins of Geneva, now a silent crater. He knelt, placing a single smooth obsidian shard, a piece of his own ship's hull, on the scorched earth. A marker, a memorial, a silent apology to the universe for his blindness. Years passed. Earth healed, slowly, painfully. The survivors rebuilt, not into the old nations, but into something new, a single, scarred, but united human community forever marked by the fire they had walked through. They called themselves the Rememberers, and the Diaspora Arcs. They reached their destinations. On 100 new worlds, in the silence of alien skies, the first human children born off Earth opened their eyes. And as they grew, they learned the story, not just of the Cathar or the war, but of Jax, Anya, Thorn, Zorvax, Kaelin. They learned of the day humanity spoke with one voice. They learned that their voice, their spirit, their very existence, was a defiance against the silence of the cosmos, a spark of chaotic, beautiful, unyielding life in the vast, indifferent dark. And whenever they looked up at the stars, they didn't just see points of light. They saw the silent witnesses, the Cathar fleet, now a permanent somber presence in Earth's orbit, a self-imposed penance, and they knew that somewhere out there, in the endless night, the universe remembered. It remembered the song. For on that day when humanity spoke with one voice, not in anger but in the pure, unvarnished truth of its existence, the universe hadn't just fallen silent in awe. It had listened, and in listening, it had been forever changed. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the echo of a species that refused to be forgotten, a testament written not in stone but in the indomitable fire of the human soul, and that echo would never truly fade.